worth. So the mention of artificial intelligence often elicits the idea of computers that gain control and eventually try to annihilate humanity. I'm thinking of one of the classics, 2001: Space Odyssey, where this computer HAL eventually takes over the mission, and that mission entails destroying the entire space crew who was set out on a mission. There's this famous line. Dave is an astronaut and he is trying to dock with the space station, and Hal says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." Hal has developed a glitch and kills off the crew one by one. This theme would be renewed in movies like Blade Runner, The Matrix, Terminator, I, Robot, Ex Machina, and Her, which explored the dangers and complexities of human interaction with artificial intelligence. In the movie Her, a lonely and depressed writer by the name of Theodore Twombly falls in love with an intelligent operating system named Samantha, who is an expert conversationalist with a commanding use of language and emotional perception. And so this movie explores the possibility of falling in love with artificial intelligence. However, these dystopian themes in many of these films are based on the assumptions that artificially intelligent beings are able to develop consciousness and some degree of autonomy. And these are all highly debatable, philosophically questionable, and that's not actually what kind of artificial intelligence we are going to be looking at this evening. This is known, for what it's worth, as wide AI or AGI, artificial general intelligence. There is, however, the use of narrow or weak intelligence, which is already much more pervasive and impactful than most of us could probably already imagine. The philosopher Mark Kekelberg recently wrote a fascinating little book entitled AI Ethics, came out a couple of years ago. And in it, he says AI is not science fiction or speculation. So-called narrow or weak AI is already here, and it is pervasive. When it comes to its potential impact, there's nothing narrow or weak about it. And we've seen this already. Watson, the computer, the artificial intelligence developed by IBM, has already defeated previous Jeopardy champions. This took place in way back in 2011. And the philosopher and cultural analyst Yuval Harari has noted already that this type of intelligence, like a Watson-like intelligence, is already being used in the fields of medicine. He points out that AI, or artificial intelligence, can store and access data banks of information about every known illness and medicine in history, and is potentially capable of updating this on a daily basis. He also notes that a Watson-like AI would be intimately familiar with a patient's entire genome and a patient's day-to-day medical history, including a patient's family history. He puts it rather compellingly. Watson will know instantly whether I visited a tropical country recently, whether I have recurring stomach infections, whether there have been cases of intestinal cancer in my family, or whether people all over town are complaining this morning about diarrhea. Probably didn't expect to hear that in this talk tonight. But I think he's on to something here, and he is certainly concerned about this notion that artificial intelligence may uncover more information than we can possibly know about ourselves. And what are the implications of that? He's also noted that the AI has incredible powers of predictability. There's one experiment that compared doctors' diagnoses of lung cancer to that of a computer algorithm. And while the human doctors had a success rate of around 50%, the algorithm correctly identified 90% of incidences. And unlike human doctors, Watson will never grow tired or hungry or get sick. Watson would have all the time in the world for the patient. Many of us wear smartwatches that monitor our health and activities, and these can indeed be impactful in a very positive way, influencing our habits in good directions. We even have smart diapers. You know, we're definitely developing a theme tonight. Pixie Scientific analyzes baby poop for clues about a child's medical condition. So there are also diapers out there that will just tell you whether or not your child needs to be changed. You don't need your nose anymore, or some of you will know what I mean, the dreaded finger test. This is also being used for diabetes monitoring. Diabetics already have access to wearable sensors to detect blood sugar levels that can free up diabetics to worry about other things. In 2014, researchers at Yale University announced a successful trial of an artificial pancreas that is controlled by an iPhone. 52 diabetics had a tiny sensor and pump implanted into their abdomens, and the pump was connected to small tubes of both insulin and glucagon. I may have mispronounced that. These are the hormones that regulate blood sugar. So the sensor would constantly measure sugar levels in the blood, transmit this data to an iPhone app that would then instruct the pump to dispense the proper hormones in proper dosage when necessary. I think these are wonderful developments of artificial intelligence in the field of medicine. But there's, always a darker side to these kinds of technologies. When we think about search engines, right? Google, other platforms use search engines that tailor searches based on the things that we've been looking at in order to anticipate future display content. And this kind of data is highly coveted by advertisers. Apple's Siri, which stands for Speech Interpretation and Recognition Interface, is nearly ubiquitous now. When it first came out, I remember sitting around a table with some friends, and we were thoroughly entertained by just asking Siri a bunch of random questions. But how does Siri shape or change our behavior, or what we ask, or how we respond when Siri doesn't produce the desired results that we're looking for? I don't think it's difficult to argue that these types of artificial intelligences can at times bring out the worst in us. This is known, by the way, as moral patiency, which considers how humans interact with others who are not necessarily human subjects or individuals. So it raises the question, can we mistreat AI? Well, I think we can, but also, how do we change in interacting with AI? It's interesting, the Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant asserted that we should not kick a dog, not because we have any duty to the dog, but because, and I'm quoting him now, it damages the kindly and humane qualities in himself, which he ought to exercise in virtue of his duties to mankind. Now, we might argue on other more theological grounds that along the lines of St. Francis, that all of these creatures matter in some way, shape, or form to God. But it's interesting that Kant, despite the fact that he's, known as the philosopher of duty, is also concerned about who we become. It's no secret that Facebook and other platforms use AI to target advertising for individuals. How many times have you seen adverts pop up and you recognize, boy, that's actually something that I may need, or maybe I was looking for this. To what degree is this manipulative? We have drones and autonomous weapons that now allow us to kill without direct human intervention. Should we use AI, autonomous weapons at all? And if so, how many decisions should we delegate to AI? This is just a rendering of the famous or infamous trolley problem in ethics, where in the first instance, someone is standing by a lever and notices a trolley out of control, and lever is switched. The trolley will divert to a track that would only kill one worker, whereas if you do nothing, the trolley would, in theory, annihilate 5 unsuspecting workers. This is utilitarianism or consequentialism. Most people would pull the lever and minimize the damage. But in the second part of that trolley problem, it's interesting to note that if the second issue that was presented was, well, if, say, you didn't have access to a switch, but you could throw a man over the bridge who happened to be standing over the tracks, who would then block the car and sacrificing his life, would that be okay? Why is it that pulling a switch, and most people had trouble with that? They were unwilling to lift a man over the bridge and throw him overboard to save the lives of 5 individuals. Yet pulling a switch seemed to be less objectionable. Does AI work in the same way? Something certainly to consider. And then we have surveillance and public safety. Facial recognition is all over the place in our world, especially in China, which has employed algorithms, AI algorithms, to detect people's moods and mental state. The rough current estimate for the number of cameras in China is hovering around 540 million cameras. And the goal is to expand that. Some people are speculating that the goal is to hit 1 billion cameras, if not more. This is a Twitter post. A Chinese company installed surveillance cameras inside toilet cubicles to monitor its staff. And these individuals were caught smoking in the bathroom and fined appropriately. Far more sinister is the government's use of facial recognition AI that's being used to track down and detain the Muslim minority group, the Uyghur population. These are deeply troubling developments. We also have predictive policing that's been informed by AI that hasn't always worked as well as we would hope. It's already been used in the courts to determine the likelihood of reoffending. There was one troubling case where the judges actually put more faith in the COMPAS algorithm. COMPAS stands for Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions. That's a bureaucratic definition if you've ever heard one. But in one particular case, the judges actually put more faith in the algorithm than in the agreement that was reached by the defendant and the prosecution. And then here's the case of Vernon Prater and Tricia Borden. Borden and her 18-year-old friend stole a bicycle and scooter as they were late to pick up her god sister from school. Shortly after they hopped on the bike and scooter, they realized they were too big for them. But a woman had come running after them, and they dropped them, saying, "Look, that's my kid's stuff." Borden and her friend immediately dropped the bike and scooter and walked away, but another neighbor had already witnessed this and called the police. They were arrested and charged with burglary and theft. And then there's 41-year-old Vernon Prater, who was picked up for shoplifting $86.35 worth of tools at a nearby Home Depot. But he was definitely the more seasoned. He'd been convicted of armed robbery and attempted armed robbery, and had actually served 5 years in prison, in addition to another armed robbery charge. Borden, now both of these individuals had misdemeanor records from the time when they were under 18. But notice this Compass algorithm rated Brescia as a high risk and Borden as a low risk. And subsequent studies showed that many false positives were disproportionately assigned to Black individuals. And notice that this turned out to be entirely wrong. There were no subsequent offenses with Brescia, but later on, Vernon Prater was caught and convicted of grand theft. So this kind of predictive policing is subject to bias, and the facial recognition being used can also be considered a violation of privacy, especially when you find cameras in the bathroom. There are also algorithms that are on social media, that act as political bots, as real people giving out hate speech and real information. You can go, this one is actually readily available on YouTube. This is supposedly President Obama at the time, saying a whole bunch of crazy things. But this is all the creation of AI. In 2016, Microsoft developed a chat bot named Tay, which was originally designed to have playful conversations on Twitter, until it eventually started tweeting racist things. So we find that, many AI problems are often the unintended consequences of technology. What is AI? That's a great question. Margaret Bowden is a philosopher and academic who spent a lot of time working on AIs. Recently published a book by Oxford on this topic, and I think she puts forward, frankly, one of the most straightforward definitions. Artificial intelligence seeks to make computers do the sorts of things that minds can do. This is from her book Nature and its Future, or Nature, Its Nature and Future of AI. This is right. This is maybe a little bit ironic, but this is a definition that the Google search engine has spit out about artificial intelligence: the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translations between languages. And then finally, Mark Kekelberg, in his book AI Ethics, defines AI as intelligence displayed or simulated by technological means. Often it's assumed that intelligence in this definition means considered intelligent by the standard of human intelligence, the sort of intelligent capacities and behaviors that humans display. The term can refer to the science or to the technologies, for example, learning algorithms. just a brief history here, and before we look at a couple types of AI and then start looking at some general concerns and then how this applies to aging. AI began at some point, most scholars would say in the 1950s, in the development of the computer in the 40s, and the birth of cybernetics in the 1950s, which is understood as basically the scientific study of control and communication in the animal and the machine. It's kind of a vague definition, but these two fields would later split. We have the Turing test developed in the 1950s, at the time considered the gold standard by which a machine interface or machine intelligence could be determined. At Dartmouth in 1956, there was a conference generally considered the birth of AI, where scientists used digital machines to simulate human intelligence. This again is considered strong or general AI. Those are not primarily the concerns of this talk, and again, as Kekelberg mentioned, it's the narrow AI that's already here and pervasive. So AI can be defined as a science or a technology. As a science, it can help us better understand human beings and other beings that have natural intelligence. And as a technology, it can help develop further technologies for useful purposes that enable us to get things done, to measure aspects of human development, applications in medicine, analyzing the environment, the economy, and producing massive data sets that have predictive power. More recent forms of AI are not just predictive, but adaptive and can learn, I use that term in scare quotes, autonomously from the data sets. There's machine learning, or it's also known as deep learning, that can often represent a neural network. And this is the frightening part, a neural network that can make decisions that are not necessarily clear to its designers. This is known as the black box phenomenon, in the sense that the programmers on one level know the architecture of the network, but don't exactly know how it is that decisions get made within the technology, within the software. This has led to a sub-movement known as explainable AI. And the whole idea there is to render less opaque what is going on deep within these adaptive programs. So this is far and away, if your eyes haven't started glossing over, they probably will here. I will go through this quickly. In fact, I'm not even going to read these, but these are 5 different types of AI, good old-fashioned AI. They represent subsets of technology and ways that artificial intelligence can be developed and applied in industry. Okay, enough about that. I want to briefly talk about some general ethical concerns. We've already kind of alluded at several: privacy, bias, justice, who controls AI, who has the power. But I think one of the more fundamental issues concerns how our perceptions of what it means to be human might be shaped or distorted. In particular, how our understanding of what it means to be created in God's image might be shaped or warped in ways that go against what it means to be God's finite creatures. And I'm going to examine some of those subtleties a little bit more when we look at these AI-assisted deep aging clocks, which purportedly give us information about our real age as distinct from our chronological age. Again, I'm going to refer to Yuval Harari's book, Homo Deus. He's not writing from a Christian perspective, but I think he accurately animates some of the concerns that ought to concern us. Towards the end of the book, he says, given the 20th century technological conditions, liberals, and he's not so much, well, I don't even want to unpack that term now. It's liberal in the sense of respecting the freedom and autonomy of individuals. We'll leave it at that for now. Liberals were right to argue that nobody can know more than I know myself. However, 21st century technology may enable external algorithms to hack humanity and know me far better than I know myself. People will no longer see themselves as autonomous beings running their lives according to their wishes, but instead will become accustomed to seeing themselves as a collection of biochemical mechanisms that is constantly monitored and guided by a network of electronic algorithms. Now, I am concerned about these things as well, and I think we ought to be concerned about them, although I don't know if I would put them as, I don't know if I would use all of the terms that Harari would. I think, first of all, and again, maybe this is just, I think an attempt to write compellingly, a bit rhetorical here about this language of knowing. We might contest whether artificial intelligence can actually know us better than we know ourselves. But I do think it is certainly acceptable to say that artificial intelligence can produce information about us that goes beyond that things that we otherwise might have known. In that sense, it almost mirrors revelation. But that's more of a theological discussion. I'm going to stop with that. And also, clearly, as Christians, I don't think we'd want to describe ourselves as entirely autonomous beings who run our lives according to our wishes. Although certainly, there's a place for that, but probably under the assumption that we belong to God, and that from a virtue perspective, things are going well when we wish the things that we wish are precisely those things that God wishes for us too. Anyway, I think Christians ought to challenge the notion that we simply should be autonomous beings who run our lives in the way we wish. Nevertheless, I think there is this lurking sense in which our bodies we might begin treating them as kind of an external apparatus of sorts instead of a core component of who we are as individuals. So what does that have to do with slowing aging? Aging itself is a complex phenomenon, but there recently has been work in the quickly developing field of biohorology, which is the scientific measurement of age and of human aging and of aging of other organisms. Scientists have, through a complex series of AI algorithms, found a way to measure DNA methylation in humans at various points along the genome to predict one's real age over against what their given chronological age is. I don't have reference to the particular study in this talk, but in my article I referenced a study where an AI aging clock algorithm developed on called Blood Age actually was tested on 19 COVID patients and predicted which of those COVID patients were likely to survive. And out of the 19 patients, the AI algorithm correctly predicted the outcome of 18 of them, whether they lived or died. Small sample size, but quite remarkable in its predictability. So, aging science, again, has always, until recently, been the realm of quackery and a rather, frankly, bizarre history that includes everything from ancient meditative techniques, fountain legends, the search for potable gold, xenotransplantation, that is basically the surgery with monkey testicles. That's all I want to say. Hyperbaric oxygen chambers, ketogenic diets, nootropic smart drugs, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. You can ask Elon Musk about that. All these kinds of biohacks have proven ultimately not to be efficacious, but yet our living conditions and medicine has improved to the point where we're living longer than ever. But make no mistake, aging science is moving into the mainstream. What was once considered the realm of science fiction is now being aided by breakthroughs in genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. The healthy lifespans of nematode worms and fruit flies have been extended through multiple techniques, including genetic engineering and selective breeding. And what's remarkable here is that in the laboratory, these organisms, these worms and flies, have been engineered to live lifespans that are, in some cases, 6 to 7 times longer than normal, all while maintaining health and vigor. So the whole idea here is not necessarily for humans to live 7 times longer than we do, but rather there's 2 approaches. The primary aim for many scientists is known as morbidity compression, also known as adding life to one's years. So right now, the fact that we're growing older collectively as a society, and that the greatest expenditures of healthcare typically happen in the last decade and half decade of one's life, our healthcare system is slowly being crippled. And so there is a huge push by scientists to not only have aging reclassified as a disease that would open up, in theory, the floodgates of federal funding, but the idea here is that even if individuals don't have their lifespans extended, the hope is that the diseases that are common to older age, diabetes, Alzheimer's, would be significantly minimized, and that the period of morbidity preceding death would not be 3 to 5 years, but perhaps 3 to 5 months, in saving us billions. The other approach is more aimed at extending healthy longevity, so adding years to one's life without necessarily rejecting the morbidity compression thesis. So these things are gaining force in mainstream science. And I just want to also add that we, as of yet, have no real, there haven't been any breakthroughs that would prove or show that we are able to slow human aging yet. I think they're probably less than a decade away. The other issue is that there are at least 12 to 15 theories of human aging, and there is no agreement on how or why it is we age. But we do have, through the use of AI, the development of these deep aging clocks. Even though we don't have any agreement on how or what constitutes biological aging or how its progression is to be measured, we do have the development of AI clocks that have been shown to predict someone's biological or real age. And in this figure, or this biological age figure, is aimed at being a better predictor of one's mortality than even the presence of disease or frailty or even one's chronological age. So these clocks are developed through a particular deep learning technique. It's a form of machine learning that employs multi-layer neural networks. And it's capable of calculating one's biological age from a simple blood sample. There are no doubt several potential uses for these deep aging clocks in research, which include dementia screening and staging, age-personalized immune oncology treatment, personalized age or age-personalized vaccines, mortality prediction, preventative medicine, and even the generation of one's synthetic self. There are scientists who are aiming at developing an array of multimodal aging clocks empowered by artificial intelligence that are trained on all accessible data types of an individual that might one day serve as our digital twin. In other words, a digital copy of us that with other algorithms could be moved forward and backwards in time biologically to predict and to predict behavior and to predict the progression of disease. This is one scientist. Zawaronko is certainly a leader in this field. He says AI-powered longevity medicine will facilitate the discovery of drug targets for specific individuals, the identification of tailored geroprotective interventions and aging and longevity biomarkers to enhance the study of aging and disease trajectories, and the identification of interventions that may help slow down or even reverse aging associated biological, physiological, or psychological processes. Again, recently, AI-powered deep longevity clocks measured the biological age of over 5,300 COVID-positive patients across 11 different New York public hospitals, utilizing these deep neural networks. And they were able, through the sheer computational power, to analyze 40 different blood biomarkers for each individual patient. And they, the study's still ongoing, but they put patients into two categories: overagers and underagers, depending on whether or not your biological age figure was higher than your chronological age. And so overagers were considered to exhibit what they called accelerated aging, while underagers were those whose rate of aging was lower. Significantly, their findings indicated that the pace of aging had a higher impact than a patient's chronological age on the lethal infection outcome. In other words, it was more predictive of survivability than it was the actual age of the patient. This data is enormously useful, and you don't need to be sick to get it. This is young.ai, longevity science that works for you. It's a personalized system, analyzes your biological data. As it shows, you can hack your longevity and improve your results. Notice you're encouraged to get your biological age. Upload your selfie and a blood test to find out your biological age and add this data, add data to get more insights about your health. So on their website it says, regular health checkups do not provide impressive value to the patient, as they do not reflect the actual longevity and performance status, and a change between checkups, different interventions, and a change from the highest performance during lifetime, and the difference between maximum possible performance for the current age. So using the latest AI technologies, Young AI provides powerful insights into your body that you can use to reverse aging and live longer. Based on your profile, Unique AI interprets your data, taking into account all of your characteristics, and it gives you a holistic overview that that powers in incredible change. Here's a question. As we move towards the finish, I promise I'll have something hopefully Christian to say. I will very shortly, but I want to ask how it is that this biological age figure might influence our behavior. It's interesting that one science said that once we develop biological age markers, one's chronological age becomes trivial. Well, that's an interesting statement. And so I've got a couple of statements here, and I think that the first one is, well, it's as follows. I wonder if this kind of information won't lead us to conclude, or won't lead us rather to see aging as a kind of judgment, which I think there's something that could be unpacked there more theologically. We don't have time to do that tonight, so you can take a deep breath. But I wonder when scientists press forward to understand and control human aging, I mean, it's not without social consequences. And our understanding of aging and what it means to grow old, I think inevitably will be influenced by our attempt to measure it precisely and bring it under our control. It is difficult to envision a future where any success in slowing aging does not imply a negative judgment against the old, especially those who have not aged well. Feminist, disability, and queer theorists have already pointed out that such negative judgments are already disproportionately aimed at women. And then there's this abstraction problem, like living life based on this biological number, this BA AI enhanced number. I think there's always this danger of abstraction and temptation to alter our life in light of such abstractions. And admittedly, it's impossible to make any sense of the world without making some abstractions or inductively putting things in categories. I think some are more important than others. I think there's something kind of Platonic at work here when the AI estimation of one's biological age is interpreted as one's real age. For in reality, that biological age is an elaborate black box or opaque statistical abstraction from the messy material world. It does invite reflection on that. I mean, it renders afresh this notion of aging just being a number. Yeah, anyway. And then finally, what about our behaviors? Would we see aging as a blessing or a burden or both? I'm sorry, will we see the possibility of slowing aging a blessing or a burden, or possibly both? I don't miss the fact that having this kind of data might indeed be just what we need to pursue a healthier lifestyle. I mean, my smartwatch is a testament to what real-time feedback can do to influence our behaviors in positively formative ways. When I used to do longer runs without a watch, I would always have to plan the route ahead of time, and there was always a temptation to cut off the last 2 miles because I would be close to home. But once I had that feedback on my watch, I never had that temptation again. But could this also be a burden, a kind of guilt-inducing burden? Or on the other hand, if our biological age turns out to be lower than our chronological age, might this tempt us to relax or abandon some disciplines that have otherwise served us well, giving us time to live, or giving us the impression that we have more time than we might otherwise have? I mean, of course, we don't need biological age, a biomarker fueled by AI, for us to kind of work from abstractions by looking at our chronological age and assuming that we may have more time than we do. But I think this BA figure or number, if we would use it, is indeed more than a number. And I think it is laden with formative and predictive power that has potential to put us into kind of this self-inflicted prison of the possible, or induce a degree of paralysis, or whether or not this figure is higher or lower than our chronological age. No doubt, again, we can just as easily make faulty assumptions based on our chronological age. And our chronological age still, to some degree, shapes our behavior and has the potential for us to reorder our priorities. But in there too, chronological age can provide us with a false sense of security. We may think we have 2 or more decades left, but the writer of Proverbs warns us not to boast about tomorrow, for we don't know what a day might bring forth. As Christians, however, we are promised to remain in the care of the one who both sees and holds tomorrow, whether or not we ever see it. So I think we are wise to ask, what or to whom are we entrusting our bodies and our future? So just a couple of points here as a Christian response, and I will wrap this up in 6 or 7 minutes. I see there's at least 9 comments. I hope I can get to most of these. I want to look at particular 2 doctrines: the incarnation of Christ quickly, and bodily resurrection. The Christian faith confesses the incarnation of the Son of God, the divine Logos, who was made flesh by the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary. Jesus Christ lived and walked on this earth as a fully human being with a body and soul, without at the same time ceasing to be fully divine. It was the Swiss Protestant theologian Karl Barth who famously asserted that the human nature of Christ is not to be determined by our humanity, but rather vice versa. In other words, Barth said very clearly that we learn as Christians what it means to be human by looking at the very human life of Jesus, though there are no simple, straightforward lines from Jesus' human nature. However, in light of the incarnation, Barth insisted that our natural bounded lifespan is a sign of our divine determination as finite creatures. I'm going to quote Barth here. He says, hence, the existence of the man Jesus in time is our assurance that time as the form of human existence is willed and created by God and given to man. That includes human finitude, and it also includes susceptibility to aging, as Jesus aged and grew up to be, at least by first century standards, a mature or older man living into his fourth decade. So in light of the incarnation, Barth would say that our natural bounded lifespan is good. Not only was Jesus' limitedness necessary for him to die on the cross for our sins, but his finitude also means that human mortality is proper to our existence and should not be regarded as intrinsically negative or evil. As embodied souls and in soul bodies, we are finite beings. Now, Barth was also sympathetic to our desire for long life as God's covenant partner, but he was also acutely aware of the reality of sin, understood in light or as made clear by the sinless Jesus, who lived his life in perfect submission to God. Sin in particular, Barth would say, given what we know about Jesus Christ, would manifest itself both in sloth and anxiety, in particular, anxiety over the span of our life. He would say, in our sloth, we are unable to rest. Sloth is not laziness, it's the inability to rest. In our sloth, we are unable to rest in the givenness of our own embodied being and allotted time, but rather fret over our limited existence by trying to, in his words, arrest the foot which brings us constantly nearer to this frontier. And in our anxiety, our allotted span becomes unbearable, Barth says, fueling this kind of frenetic, ceaseless activity, including our quest for longer life. So from Barth's perspective, he might label attempts to slow aging through AI technology as products of both sloth and anxiety, our inability to rest and our inability to accept our finitude. The question, however, remains as to whether every such attempt to slow human aging must be understood along these lines. And I think that's a much more difficult and thorny question. The other doctrine, and I'm sorry, we're running out of time, is bodily resurrection. This is no less important for us. Paul in Corinthians, so it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown imperishable is raised. What is sown perishable is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a physical body, it is raised a spiritual body. I don't have time to go into what Anthony Thistleton said about spiritual body, other than the core point that he wants to make in reading Paul here is that this is not contrasting, the resurrection body is not contrasting a material versus an immaterial body, but that spiritual body for Paul means a physical body enlivened by the Holy Spirit. All we have to do is to look at the very real physical resurrection body of Christ. I think at the end of the day, this project is dualistic in that it sets our bodies against our souls. And I also think there's some Gnosticism at work. And by that, I mean treating the body as a problem, and also relying on a Gnosticism asserted that there was knowledge available to the privileged elite who understood the real condition of humanity. And I wonder if indeed some of our anti-aging scientists aren't new Gnostics in a sense, new priests who have inside information into the true condition of our state and as aging beings. My summary, and again, for the sake of time, is that there's caution that should be warranted here. I am not entirely against using this data, but I think given the incarnation and the resurrection, I don't know if asking the question how far is too far, or what lines should Christians not cross. I don't know if that's helpful. I think we rather should consider whether or not the use of this data in terms of deep aging clocks might tempt us to view our bodies as our own properties, and might adversely affect our views of an aging and declining body and how we care for others who are aging and declining. Anyway, I'm going to stop now and take a few minutes for questions here. As I'm, maybe there's that there may be a few. I see there are several chats or comments. Do whatever you want.
Okay, Todd.
Take it away, Melody. And thanks for your time. Yes.
Thanks so much, Todd. That was excellent. Very interesting. There are some really interesting questions here. So I'm going to scroll through to starting with the first ones. If those of you who are listening want to add any questions as we go, feel free to keep adding them and we'll see what happens. So the first one I have here, it says AI seeks to extract knowledge from data, and the data, if not fake, comes from the natural world. So is AI bringing to us what we should have known as revealed by God?
That's a great question. I suppose it depends, right? I mean, I take as the most important revelation as being first Christ, the advent of Christ, and the scriptures that bear witness to Christ. But that doesn't mean that that we wouldn't say that this data is revelatory in a beneficent or good sense. I mean, I think that probably needs some more unpacking, but I'm not against a more mundane understanding of revelation. The bigger question as to whether God is behind this is probably one that we, I don't know if we can answer that. But I think there are ways that we could use this data that are beneficial. But I also am, I think I'm concerned about the dangers of having more information, or having information outweigh the wisdom of knowing what to do with it. It's a great question. I love that question.
Excellent.
I probably didn't answer it, but that's my best.
Well, if the person who asked it feels like you didn't answer it, maybe they can reword it. So here's the second one. A statistics model cannot always produce the correct output. In the case where a black box, that is a neural network, machine learning model goes, wait a minute, let me try that again. In the case where a black box machine learning model goes wrong on a critical task, who is to blame? The user, the algorithm designer, or the data provider?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, but yeah, that's precisely the question that that scientists and ethicists are wrestling with, and that is precisely, I think, why there is this push for explainable AI. I would think that I think the culpability should be spread around. I don't think programmers and developers ought to be naive about these possibilities, and maybe if all parties were held responsible, we might be more circumspect about some of these designs. But yeah, another great question. And if we can't answer that question, that shouldn't that give us pause if we're not sure how to assign blame?
Interesting. Okay, here's another one. Now, this person has sent a message saying they think you may have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It says, are there concerns about these biological clocks or technologies like young AI being used for discrimination, like in the movie Gattaca?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I'm not terribly concerned about privacy here, but if um, if on a larger social scale, this here's my concern. I'll just put it this way. At what point, if this technology becomes readily available, at what point will those who choose not to avail themselves of this data, at what point might they be considered irresponsible? And that may never occur, but that is kind of one of those dystopian possibilities that's out there. And there always is. If you enlist in this technology and your biological age is produced by a blood sample, I mean, there's always a concern of privacy. And what if, would you want your employer to get that information? Yeah, there are concerns there as well.
Okay.
But yeah, bias is always a possibility. And I'm, given the fact that we are already increasingly suspicious of the old, I don't see the development of this technology helping us there.
Okay. Thank you. This one is more of a statement, but if you have any response to it, that would be great. The idea of insurance companies requiring this sort of test is a thought that's a bit frightening.
It is.
Or requirements to extend our lives through AI suggested beneficial treatment equally frightens me. The idea this side of eternity is to be treated like the end all be all, I believe, assumes eternity and God's sovereignty isn't supreme.
Yeah, those are good points. And I think those are precisely the things that Christians need to keep in mind. And hence the reference to bodily resurrection, right? This on the one hand, we have Paul saying to live is Christ and to die is gain. But Paul was also happy to stick around as long as he possibly could. And the difference for us as Christians is that we know something better awaits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong for us to want more life or longer life, if indeed life is a gift from God. So it really is from a Christian perspective, it's not an easy question to answer. If this world is all there is, then it becomes a whole lot easier, right, to answer. Then I'm going to do whatever it takes to stick around as long as possible, which means, as long as I'm healthy and autonomous. From a Christian perspective, that can't be the last word.
Excellent. Thank you. This one says, can insights be taken from studies of how people have reacted to genetic tests and finding out that they're predisposed to particular illnesses?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah. And this is, this fits in the same category. Proceed with caution. And this is a question that I don't know how to answer for Christians, and that is, is it, would you want to know if you're genetically predisposed to certain maladies, especially ones that are deadly? And is that irresponsibility, or is that a fear factor, or is that I'm going to trust God factor? I don't know how to answer that, but it's in the same. The biological age figure is probably not as intimidating as having your entire genome decoded or uncovered. I haven't done that. I don't know if I want to. There's part of me that thinks that I, psychologically, since I'm given to worry anyway, and have a acutely developed ability to catastrophize, like why would I want to do that? But other people would say, look, I want to know.
Mhm.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So this one is, let's see here. Wait a second. Okay. Follow up to the question about knowing you're predisposed for certain maladies. How does this kind of information intersect with the long tradition of developing wisdom in the context of ill health? Does this kickstart one's entry into the process of seeking such wisdom, or does it further pathologize illness as something to be cured, always avoided?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very eloquently stated. I mean, those are some of the issues there. Especially with aging. Do we want to flatten out aging as a condition that needs to be treated by medicine? I would, along the lines of wisdom, I don't think there can be such a thing as a disembodied wisdom. There is the wisdom of the body, and that is precisely the danger again, that we develop a rather thin response to this data that might foreclose other more Christian and more virtue forming responses to illness. At the same time, I want to be careful and acknowledge that, medicine can be a power for good. And it is not wrong to seek and to aggressively pursue healing and pursue medicine to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah, great. That's a great point. Yeah.
Okay, and we've got someone saying thank you for answering their question earlier. Cool.
Thanks for sticking around,
Okay.
everybody. I appreciate that. And yeah.
Don't see any other questions. I'm going to throw that out there. Any other questions?
Wonderful. Then I want to let you all go because it's 12 after 8, but please come back next week. Dr. Emily Winneborg is going to talk about faithful Christian presence in our godless university. Now, I just hacked her title. It's actually in the post-secular university. As far as I'm aware, she's going to unpack how education has shifted from a broadly Christian outlook into a secular one and now a post-secular one. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be a Christian in this kind of environment? So please come back next week. I'm looking forward to hearing Emily.
We did get one more question. Is that okay if we ask it? It says
no, something about the Bible. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just kidding.
Can AI help us in our understanding of the Bible? It is something about the Bible.
I suppose. I suppose it might. But I suppose it also runs us into the potential dangers of maybe rely, as some of us might be tempted to rely too much on commentaries and exegetical tools in the original language. Look, I'm all for that. I think we may run the risk of forgetting that the Bible is a living book through which the Spirit speaks.
Very cool. Thank you, Todd.
Listen, I love those tools too. So thank you, everybody. God bless you all. Thanks for coming. And have a great evening.
Awesome.
And this is being recorded. I don't know where it's going to be uploaded, but I assume somewhere on our website, if you care at some point. That's fine.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening.